So Disney Lucasfilm have just announced Star Wars The High Republic. What this appears to be is a discount Star Wars Legends and Expanded Universe, which takes place 200 years before the events of the prequels, and will, according to them, will tell us new stories for adults and children and teens, and every single Star Wars fan is going to have a story for them. Right, so let's talk about this. I've seen the trailer numerous times, I've examined it, I've seen other people's takes on it, and I thought I'd give my thoughts right now. This is not going to be a scripted video, it's just me talking off the cuff, so I do apologize, my work is usually scripted. Let's talk about Star Wars The High Republic. First, let's talk about the good things. As I've examined this trailer numerous times, the concept art looks pretty good. I won't lie. Some of the concepts I've seen so far really tickled my Star Wars fanboy bone, and I'm kind of excited for what I've seen in terms of like concept and the way it looks. The art style is all great. Can't speak for some of the characters, but it looks pretty good. I like that they're placing value on Lucasfilm's legacy by bringing in Ian McCain, the guy who drew Darth Maul, to help with some of the designs. That's a good decision. Good on him. What's very curious, and a lot of people are talking about this, is the era they've chosen. 200 years prior to the Skywalker saga is what they're calling it. I just call it the OG 6. There were 6 Star Wars movies, guys. 6. There was one good fan fiction called Rogue One, and then it just sort of cuts off from there. So, 200 years before the OG 6, we get the High Republic. Now, another positive that has occurred to me is that they aren't ruining anything else that we know and love. It's a completely new era that, to my knowledge, no one has tackled before. Not even the old Lucasfilm story writing team that did Legends, Rebels, The Old Republic, etc. This is the High Republic, and thankfully, to my knowledge, at least in terms of what I know about the EU, I'm not very big. I was never really too big into the EU, to be perfectly honest. It's not that I had no desire for it. I just stuck with the films. I'm not a very big reader. I play the video games. I played the Fallen Order just now. I think it's one of the best Star Wars games ever made. And I played The Force Unleashed. I've started playing retro Star Wars. Some of those fucking retro games, man, are so good. But my EU knowledge is very limited. But in terms of the High Republic, as far as I know, no EU has really taken place in that time era. It's a complete blank slate, and the Lucasfilm officials in the trailer have said as much. It's a blank slate. We're getting in all these writers to basically create to their heart's content and collaborate amongst themselves. So I am kind of interested in the era, and I'm breathing a sigh of relief that there's nothing left to ruin, because all they've done so far is try to suck whatever they can from nostalgia and the original trilogy, which they've milked to death. That cow, man, that cow is done oozing milk. It's now oozing blood, all right? That's how hard they fucking milked the OT. So there's nothing left to ruin in terms of the OT. I am a little bit worried in terms of the prequels, what they can ruin, because it's a prequel to the prequels, but then again, 200 years is a long time. There's nothing really to ruin. However, one character we know from the prequels is going to be in this era, and that is Yoda. And I am clutching my chest. People say that the prequels ruined Yoda, and those people are retarded. But Yoda in the hand, I mean, Lucasfilm had one stab at Yoda, and look what they fucking did in The Last Jedi. They turned him into a puppet to, appease the fanatical puppet fetish fucktards on the internet. And Rian Johnson basically broke Star Wars lore by having Yoda shoot lightning from the sky and interact with the physical realm despite being a Force ghost. So, thanks, Ryan. Thank you very, very much. Your name will echo through history for the narcissistic prick that you are. Anyway, back on topic. They've had one stab at Yoda, and it was a disaster. Now they're gonna have another stab at Yoda, and I betcha anything from the legacy of Star Wars that they're going to touch, I just immediately assume by default they're going to ruin. So I'm really worried for Yoda. But aside from Yoda, I like the concept art. I like the era. In theory, it seems appealing to me. I like that they want to tell something new. So I'm interested in the time era and relieved that there's pretty much almost nothing else that they can ruin. And again, it's a good thing they're bringing some of the artists back from the OG era. A simpler time, a fun time, one that I'll miss till the day I die. But that's all. That's the only good that I drew from this trailer. Now let's talk about the bad. And the bad is just about everything else, all right? Let's talk about the first thing. They have recruited so many fucking writers from all walks of, well, I guess all walks of, like, the comics industry. They've brought in some writers from Marvel. They've brought in some writers from, I think a few things, like other... I don't know these people. I don't know where they brought in these writers from. For all I know, they could have a few writers from the EU, but it doesn't seem that way. Like some of the old writers, I don't think they brought them back. I think people would be a lot more optimistic if they did, but the takes I've seen, they're not optimistic. And truth be told, I'm only familiar with one writer, and that's only by name. Her name's Claudia Gray, and the only reason I'm familiar with her is because I've seen she's written a book about my favorite fucking duo in all of Star Wars, which is Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. And I'm curious to see how I'm tempted to read that book only because of my fondness for the prequel trilogy and my love for the Phantom Menace. Because I'm curious to see how she's going to ruin those characters. Again, if it's anything Disney and it's anything from the legacy of Star Wars, I just assume they're going to ruin it. So I'm tempted to read that book, but by the accounts I've heard from my community, apparently she did a good job with that book and she's a decent writer. That's one. I think there's another guy called Charles Stewart. I can't pronounce his name, and I'm not even going to bother to remember it. And apparently he's done decent work in comics, but then you have all these other guys. Now, if the Disney fucktard fanfiction trilogy has taught us anything, is that multiple writers tends to be a very bad idea, especially if there's very poor communication between them, right? Now, for the Disney fucktard fan fiction trilogy, we had J.J. Abrams and we had Rian Johnson. That's two writers that couldn't agree on a clear-cut story from start to finish over the course of 3 films. These two writers butted heads, royally screwed up the story, and pretty much killed Star Wars, if I'm being perfectly honest. If there's one thing Star Wars needs at this point, it's a clear vision. This is likely going to lead to inconsistencies between projects and production problems down the line, whether it be books, comics that tie into certain books that tie into future movies or Disney Plus series. Having too many writers is not a good idea. Now, granted, the EU had plenty of writers, but George Lucas was the man who approved everything. George Lucas knew his product better than anybody. So that's how it worked. It was multiple writers, but there was a clear vision. It was helmed. There was a head honcho that helmed it all, that approved everything, signed off on everything. Which is why the EU, from all accounts I've heard, is much. The EU in terms of book material I've heard is kind of hit or miss, but overall, had a clear direction, right? Look, George Lucas helmed the EU with all those writers. Kathleen Kennedy has helmed 3 films and a couple spin-offs, and it's turned into a fucking mess. Now she has all these writers, and she who already barely knows a fucking thing about Star Wars, is meant to somehow rein these writers in and make something that makes a sliver of fucking sense. I don't buy it, and I don't trust it, and I think it's honestly a joke to expect anything in terms of success from this High Republic project under her helm, especially with all these writers. And again, if JJ and Rian Johnson, not to mention there are several other examples I could mention, writers tend to be very selfish. They want to tell their story. They don't give a shit about what the other person has to tell, even if it conflicts with their own work. They're just going to go ahead and do it. So if these writers don't have very good communication, it's going to royally fuck up this whole project. Now, from what I have seen, it looks like these writers are working together. They're brainstorming together, and we'll get to that brainstorming in a second. But they seem to be communicating very well amongst themselves. That much I can say based on what I've seen, but it is Disney and they like to hide the truth, so for all we know, we could just be seeing the slivers of happy moments at Skywalker Ranch, where in actuality they're screaming at each other from down the hall. Who knows? Alright, but again, too many writers is what's got me worried. Now let's talk about the agendas at play. It was the channel Geeks and Gamers that brought this to my attention. During the announcement trailer, they displayed a brainstorming board which showcased their priorities and agendas for what Star Wars The High Republic should be. And it was alarming to say the least. Now, from what I can tell from here, they had, 3 columns? I think the middle one is what they love about Star Wars, is that it's not pro-war, which is, Star Wars has never been pro-war. They've got droids, mythic, space and lightsaber battles. It says no single main character, the Force. The reason I say that's the column of what they like about Star Wars is because it has a heart right next to it. And then it has what they want Star Wars to be. And then it has Star Wars fiction. I don't know why they have fiction on the very left. It's kind of hard to tell from here. What's the difference between Star Wars wishes and Star Wars fiction? Maybe it's what people liked about the fiction. What they've highlighted here is, of course, multiple columns. They have one of their priorities and one of their desires and loves about Star Wars is how diverse it is. This is diversity in Star Wars fiction is what drew them to it. It says what their Star Wars wishes are, and fifth from the top is representation and diversity. Now, this is very alarming to me. And it confirms the agenda we've all knew they've had from the very beginning. So thank you, Geeks and Gamers, for spotting this out and bringing this to all of our attention. Now, we know Rey is the poster child for the feminazis of the world. We know that Finn was just in there to be a Tolkien black guy who can represent the people of color because of how wasted he was in the grand scheme of things of that story they tried to tell, that horror show that they tried to tell. Poe was wasted. Holdo was, I'd say Rey was the feminazi's wet dream. She was basically just Disney's middle finger to George Lucas. I'd say Holdo was the feminazi's wet dream. Rose Tico was just, again, a Tolkien Asian character who she wasn't really a Tolkien Asian character. She didn't really act Asian. She was just in there as a diversity inclusion. She had no purpose whatsoever. Her sister had a small purpose. These characters are put in there and they're sold solely on the base of diversity, inclusion, and representation. Where in actuality, was Mace Windu sold on the fact that he was black? No. Was Lando sold on the fact that he was black? No. Was Padme sold on the fact that she was a woman? No. Was, what's another good example? Probably some EU characters I'm missing. I know Juno from The Force Unleashed was pretty cool. Who else? Someone help me out in the comments if I'm missing anybody. Leia wasn't sold on the fact that she was a woman. Mon Mothma wasn't. You know what I mean? So it's those characters worked and they were beloved, and diversity was never an issue. Not to mention, Star Wars has always had a wide array of diversity, not just in terms of humanity, but in terms of race, species, religion, etc. How many Star Wars species have a Wikipedia article about them now? You have so many Star Wars characters and planets and lore and that belong to different walks of life in George Lucas's universe. I'm sorry. So that was never the focus. That's why that story and those characters worked and blended in with each other and interacted with each other seamlessly. Diversity and representation is a selling point for these writers, which is why the characters are going to suck. Because they're going to waltz in and they're going to be pushed to the forefront solely based on their identity, their sex, race, you name it. And that's terrible. It's not going to be a good product if that's their priority. And this just paints their agenda all over the screen for all of us to see. This, aside from that, I'm not very enthusiastic about the direction that they're thinking of taking this in at all. Again, I'm slightly appealed by the era and what they're going to do, but there is some good stuff on here. They want to tell more about the Sith Empire, Chaos Agents, Relic Hunters. They want to, that's some interesting stuff. They have a villain of space Vikings called the Nile, they said. That's intriguing. But my last real grievance with the High Republic is what I like to call the Captain Marvel syndrome. And what is the Captain Marvel syndrome? Well, all right, let's put it this way. Rewriting the ending of a story with new characters and making them super, super powerful and character assassinating everything else. Destroying the old and replacing the new to make a second ending and rewriting the ending for your product and your characters off someone else's work. That's always going to be the Rey syndrome. All right? However, it's rewriting the beginning, the origins, that is the Captain Marvel syndrome. The reason I say this is because Captain Marvel was passed off to a bunch of writers way out of their depth who had no regard for the continuity of the MCU and just didn't give a fuck about everything that came after. So they tried to redesign the MCU story solely around Captain Marvel, giving her the strongest powers in the MCU, making her the first person to come in contact with the Tesseract, making the Avengers name inspired by her. It all came from Captain Marvel, setting aside that Captain America was the first Avenger. Captain Marvel was a fucking dumpster fire, and that's putting it mildly, and it almost derailed the MCU before Endgame. She almost ruined Endgame, and I personally really like that movie. I know a lot of people do not like it, and that's absolutely fine. But Captain Marvel, they tried to rewrite, because they're going to go push forward with Captain Marvel and Brie Larson, and you know, the woke era of the MCU is looming upon us. I have almost no hope for Black Widow, even though I really like Black Widow. They're going to pass her off to writers who do not understand her. They're going to pass Black Widow off to the script doctor of Captain Marvel. So how good can it really be? I mean, the trailer looks alright, but I'm almost positive they're going to ruin Black Widow. But yeah, Captain Marvel syndrome. Rewriting the origins to serve a character that you created. Like I said, this plays into writers being very selfish, and look at how many fucking writers there are. So, Captain Marvel syndrome, rewriting the prequels before the prequels. Maybe Yoda, you know, took orders from some high up female Jedi who treated him like her bitch. Maybe the Jedi were allowed to love and have families after all, completely undermining the way of the Jedi as we know it on Coruscant, which completely is going to just fuck with Anakin's upbringing and his conflict, if there's precedent for Jedis being allowed to get married and have children. And again, the Jedi are a product of George Lucas. It's very clear that that Lucasfilm does not understand who the Jedi are and how they conduct themselves. Granted, Fallen Order was very good, but you know, that was a video game, and that was done by a very good development company called Respawn Entertainment. Excellent writers, excellent staff. They did a fantastic job of that. But in this time era, under more direct influence from Kathleen Kennedy, I can just see them fucking up the way of the Jedi and the lore even more. Because look what they haven't retconned in expanded universe material. They pass off Darth Vader to a bunch of comic artists who are fucking retards, and Darth Vader's origins get rewritten. Palpatine becomes Anakin's father. That's retarded. Padme apparently was just recently resurrected in a comic. That's retarded. It makes Anakin's mythology, Darth Vader's mythology, and Darth Vader's tragedy even lesser with all this bullshit thrown in. And it undermines the lore that George Lucas created, and that's unforgivable. That's shameless, and it's wrong. So, what are they not willing to retcon to serve their vision? These writers don't give a fuck about Star Wars, from what I've seen. And please provide me evidence to the contrary. This is what I've seen from Lucasfilm in the past. These writers have done apparently something each for Lucasfilm in terms of writing in the past, and now they get to helm their own projects. I think it's a looming dumpster fire waiting to happen. I think it's going to please some fans, but it's going to, from what little fans I have left, it's going to polarize the rest. And that's why I've called this Star Wars The High Republic a polarizing mess, a soon-to-be polarizing mess. Now, a couple of extra details I wanted to sort of talk about regarding The High Republic. Now, this whole project was started in mid-2018, which is post The Last Jedi and right around the time that Solo tanked. And this is also around the time that Kathleen Kennedy, despite every fucking morsel of common sense that exists in this world, her term of Luke as head of Lucasfilm was extended by three extra years. Now that makes me think, was this the ace up her sleeve that saved her job? Bob Iger said, Kathleen, Star Wars is failing under you. What are you going to do about it? It's like, don't worry, Bob. We got, we have a whole new staff, whole new era. We're designing it as we speak. We've flown in specialists, artists, everything, and they're at Skywalker Ranch working on it right now. We're going to have a whole new era of characters, action figures, DVDs, movies, toys, soundtracks, you name it. And you're going to be able to market that. Disney, we're going to be okay. And he's like, all right, cool. You get to keep your job for an extra 3 years. See how we go. And 2021 is when her term is meant to expire, unless she gets it renewed again. So maybe that's just long enough to see how the High Republic pans out. Maybe if the High Republic tanks, they got nothing left. Maybe that will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Granted, Cock Eager's not in charge anymore, so, who knows with this new guy that brought in to be CEO of Disney. And that also makes me think, if they were planning this since post Last Jedi and after Solo lost money, were they well aware of the disaster that the Rise of Skywalker would be? Were they already admitting it to themselves, saying, all right, we got to just get Rise of Skywalker over with, JJ, do the best you can. The High Republic, this is what we really got to use to bounce back. So it makes you think, based on the timing of how this all lines up. But, look, to finalize my thoughts, I'm not really optimistic. Again, I'm slightly intrigued. I like the concepts. This takes place in the Jedi Council 200 years prior to the prequels. I hope they leave Yoda the fuck alone and just don't even touch him. They're welcome to tell their own stories. They're welcome to mess up their own shit. I just don't want them fucking with the lore of the Jedi. And I don't want them ruining George Lucas's creation any more than they already have. I very much love the prequels. And I think they are in the most danger of being retconned and ruined by, Disney. I love the OT as well, but honestly, based on my upbringing, I think if they ruin the prequels, that's going to hit me even harder than what they did to Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Princess Leia. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the High Republic. Thank you all for watching. I very much appreciate it. Sorry, I know this wasn't the most fluid of my videos, but this was all off the cuff. Didn't really script it out. Just giving you my thoughts. And yeah, let me know what you think below in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks very much for staying till the end, and I'll see you next time.